Today I'm going to teach you how to shoot with an iPhone and how my editing process is. So I'm going to go through all the workflow from the way I shoot, how I light, and then the editing process and one of the transitions, and teach you how to do it. It doesn't matter what editing program you're using. I'm using DaVinci. You can use PI, you can use Final Cut. The principles are the same. So all the effects that I'm using are very simple, basic techniques. So you can replicate this in your own editing software. Now there's only one lighting above us, straight above. So it's a top-down lighting. You can use any kind of light as long as it's kind of just the top-down shot. It gives you that very moody Godfather look. Now in terms of shooting with your phone, now I think with the latest phones it's very capable in itself in terms of in-body stabilization. As long as you're not moving with your legs and you control everything when you shoot, you're getting a very smooth footage just by moving the upper torso. Now with an iPhone 13 I shot everything with the main camera. I'm not using any wide angle, I'm not using portrait mode, I'm not using zoom. The reason for that is because I want to maximize the sensor size so I get the best quality, especially given that the environment is fairly dark. And make sure you're focused on your subject. Now, especially we're shooting so close, hold on to the screen, focus on the subject, lock it on, and then turn down the exposure so it gives that more contrasty, moody look, right? The backgrounds are really dark and it only shows the actual product itself. And it makes the editing a lot easier as well in post, which I'll go through a little bit later on. Now, in terms of the movements, we did a couple of movements. This is, trial and error. You really have to get the shot right, make sure the movement is matching with your product. I shot a potato chip just so, throw it up in the air and then come back down. That's the main shot that I want. And I kind of knew that before I got into this whole shooting process. So think about it beforehand, what you want to shoot, the possible transitions. Camera movement is one of the main key points of a successful transition, right? You have matching movements from your first scene to your second scene. So in my case, it's the moving down shot that I'm going to link the two shots together to make it seamless. We did about 600 tries and eventually we got the shot we want, and here's what it looks like, the raw footage of the two shots. You can see, okay, so this is the first one. It goes up and down, and the second one is, there we go. Now there's two things you notice from the shots. One is it's playing back in slow-mo, and the reason for that is because I shot it in high frame rate. Now I shot it in 1080p in 120 FPS. I also shot it in slow-mo mode. Okay, so it just makes this whole thing very smooth, and I think that's really important to make a good smooth transition. And the second problem you can realize is the white balance. I kind of overlooked this area. I just kind of shot everything in automatic mode in the default camera app. Probably if I did it again, I would probably use Filmic Pro or something that you can set the white balance and then just leave it and forget it. But it's very easy to fix, so I'm going to teach you how to do that. So if you're in DaVinci, now keep in mind, Final Cut, PR, it's the same workflow, okay? Just go into the color tab. Now, very easily, I am going to click on the white balance tool. Basically choose a scene where there's a white, so the table, which is perfect. Now go to the color wheel and choose the suction pen and just click. And there you go, easy as that. Obviously you can do it manually, just set the temperature. If you're lumetri, set a temperature. It's kind of cold, so go to something warm so it matches what we've got in the first scene. I think it's around 1200, I believe. Now the first scene seems to be a little too bright compared to the second one if you look at the scopes. So we're going to turn it down a little bit, turn down the highlight a little bit, turn down the midtones, and I'm also going to crush the shadows. You can either use the lift wheel or you can just kind of turn up the shadows and turn it down, right, to match whatever you want. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly because I've already done this, but you get the point. In the second scene, I'm going to actually turn up the midtones a little bit, the highlights a little bit, and then just crush the shadows as well. It just makes the editing a lot easier, right? I just want the chips to kind of catch your attention rather than the person in the back. Right? Something like there. Yeah, seems okay. Okay, so that's fine. Now let's go to the scene. What you want to do is move your first scene up to the second layer, so on top of your second scene, because we are going to overlay this. The way we're going to do this is with a mask. But before we go into the mask, we need to make sure both scenes have the same speed, because like I said, you want to have a smooth transition. So the first scene where the chips kind of fall down, right, it's at a different speed. Look at that, right? It kind of speed ramps up. Whereas the second scene, it's right, it's very slow. Okay, so we need to match this. Now you can do speed ramp. I'm sure you can find tutorials, but in DaVinci all you got to do is just right click and then go to retime controls. So I'm going to find the point where I want to slow down the footage, so around here, right, kind of right there, add a point or add a keyframe, and then speed everything before that up, right? So it's going to put up 400%, so something like that. I'm going to start from here. I want to start from here, so everything before that I'm going to delete. So delete everything before that. Okay, so something like that. Now this still seems a little fast, so what you can do is you can actually manually adjust the position by adding keyframes. But before that, I want to teach you something else. Right click and then go to retime curve and you'll see the curve. All right? And on the left, click on this button and go retime speed. If you don't see this button, it means this is actually too small. You can shrink it out, right? Make it bigger or smaller and you'll be able to see this actual arrow. Just hold down options, and I think it's Alt on PC, and then click and turn on your retime speed. Okay, now we have our speed ramp. Click on this arrow and just click on this button and it'll automatically ramp the speed. So basically it's gradually increasing the speed and then gradually slowing down to give that smooth transition. And the second thing is I want to adjust the camera movement, okay, manually. All you have to do is add a keyframe at the very start, okay, and then go to the scene where you stopped your ramp, which is around here. And then we're going to adjust this and move it down a little bit, like maybe here. And at the start, I'm actually going to move it down a little bit. So it's, right, it's giving that, I'm animating that motion. Like something like here. Now, don't worry about the head right now. I'm going to fix that later, but something like this. Now you've got this same kind of motion, right? It's a lot easier to link it up. Okay, now we're just going to match the two scenes together. Easier way to do this, just click on this. And then maybe turn down the opacity. Okay, on the right hand side, you can do this in all programs. Just turn down the opacity until you find a spot that you like. And I think I like it. Let's move this so it doesn't distract us. So maybe around right about here. Okay, that's where we want the mask to start. Okay, and then I'm going to move this to here as well. Okay. And maybe adjust this position just a little bit so it matches the potato chip on the first frame. So I want to go back to the positions and just kind of adjust this up a little bit right about here. And then as we go forward, we just want to match the potato chips speed. All right, somewhere around there. Okay, now let's do the fun bit. To make it easier, I'm going to just cut here. So I'm going to start this as a separate frame. I'm going to turn this off. Makes it easier. And go to the color page, right? This is where you add the mask in DaVinci. You can add mask in Premiere as well. In DaVinci, all you have to do, I'm going to add a mask, right? Click on the pen tool. First thing, let me turn up the opacity again. Okay. All right, so let's add a pen tool. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to mask out the bag, okay? And then you need to add an alpha output and drag that across so then you can see the next layer. Just like that. Perfect, right? Okay, now you want to add some softness, so feather on the inside so it kind of blends the two shots or the potato bags together. And now is the fun part. You have to rotoscope or you have to keyframe every single frame. Luckily, this is not a very long frame, so it should be fairly quick. Let me just show you how it's done. So you go to this page in DaVinci, click on frames and add a keyframe first, okay? And then just adjust the feather so that, you know, the two potato chips kind of blends a lot better, right? You don't want the hand to show up. Right, this is where it kind of, you got to finesse a little bit and then adjust the two frames so that it kind of blends a lot better. Now you can see these two frames don't blend as well, so you might have to adjust the positioning of the potato chips of the second bag a little bit so that, you know, it kind of matches each other. Maybe like this. Now it looks a lot better, okay? So this is where the potato chips kind of just breaks apart initially, so something like this. You can fix this later on, but I'm just going to do it fairly quick. And then press right, you go to the next frame, and you adjust a little bit. Okay, thanks to editing, a couple of hours just went by like that. Now, here's the final product. I'm going to show you frame by frame of the actual shot that I did. So this is the first scene, and this is the second scene. So as it moves, I'm kind of letting the chips fall out of the first bag, and then coming back down, coming back out. And I'm blending the two bags together, right? And then here we go, right? Now, as it falls, you can see that this is the first bag, and as I'm going through, I'm transitioning the bags, right? right? So it blurs out, and now I'm seeing the second bag more than I'm seeing the first bag, all right? And then it kind of just replace itself. And this thing happens so quick, you're not going to be able to pick it up with your eyes. If you look carefully, there are a lot of issues and glitches, but this is done fairly quick. Shouldn't be a problem. And then a final touch, go to this scene, go to effects, and then you can add in a blur. I added in a motion blur. You can add directional blur if you don't have motion blur. Basically, as long as the blur is happening in the direction of the camera. So in this case, from top to bottom, and then I've turned it up to maximum. So look at the person as I turn off the blur. Can you see that? It's very crisp, very sharp. If you add blur, it helps blend the two frames together, especially the bags as it's falling down. And then the end result, you should have something, you know, fairly good. So just look at it frame by frame, right? See the blur, it's blurring the background. And then finally, just add in a sound effect and you have something like this. Hey, I hope you guys like this kind of tutorial. This is actually what I do, but I'll be sharing more in the coming weeks. So if you like, feel free to subscribe, and I'm George. I'll catch you next one.